Hello and welcome. This presentation provides an overview of the Proposition 68 Groundwater Program and Application process. Before I get started, this is a link where you can find additional information about the Groundwater Grant Program. You will find the Proposition 68 program page, as well as other grants and funding programs for groundwater cleanup. Here is today's agenda. Today, I will be reviewing the Proposition 68 guidelines, the Proposition 68 application process, attachments for the proposal, evaluation scoring criteria, tips for completing proposals, and a general timeline for submission and application review. First, let me go over some background information. So Proposition 68 is officially titled the California Drought, Water, Parks, Climate, Coastal Protection, and Outdoor Access for All Act of 2018. Chapter 11.1 of Proposition 68 is about groundwater sustainability. In this chapter, Prop 68 allocates $80 million for grants for treatment and remediation activities that prevent or reduce the contamination of groundwater that serves as a source of drinking water. After accounting for administrative costs, $74 million will be available for projects. Grants will be administered through the Division's Financial Assistance Application Submittal Tool, otherwise known as FAAST. The Proposition 68 guidelines were adopted by the Water Board on August 20th, 2019. So in terms of funding, $74 million is available for grants. $16 million has been set aside for projects serving severely disadvantaged communities, otherwise known as SDACs. All eligible projects can apply for funding utilizing this first solicitation. If there are not adequate SDAC applications by the solicitation deadline of January 24th, 2020, then DFA will continuously accept applications for the SDAC set aside until the set aside funds are committed. A unique aspect to this program is that these grant funds can be utilized for non-capital expenditures, such as ongoing operation and maintenance of existing facilities. Now I will focus on providing an overview of the program priorities established in the proposition, as well as the requirements and preferences established by the State Board. The project priorities established in the proposition include projects that leverage funding sources, provide workforce education and training, contractor and job opportunities for disadvantaged communities, and projects that incorporate Prop 68 Chapter 11.1 prioritization criteria, which are detailed on the next slide. These are the criteria that are examined in order to prioritize the projects. The threat posed by groundwater contamination to the affected community's overall drinking water supplies, the potential for groundwater contamination to spread, the potential of the project, if fully implemented, to enhance local water supply reliability, the potential of the project to maximize opportunities to recharge vulnerable high-use groundwater basins, and that the project addresses contamination at a site for which responsible parties have not been identified, or where the identified responsible parties are unwilling or unable to pay for the total cost of the cleanup. These are the eligibility requirements established by the State Board. Projects must be identified as high priority by regulatory agencies. Projects must be completed within the appropriation timeframe. Applicants must demonstrate the availability of any matching funds. And applicants must have adequate rights of way for the useful life of the project. All right, here are the project preferences that are identified in the guidelines. Projects that comply with this list will be given preference over projects that don't. Projects should support and advance the human right to water policy adopted by the State Board. Preference will be given to projects that benefit the largest number of people per dollar spent, considering community size, and projects that remove the most contamination at the lowest cost, and projects that promote groundwater sustainability. Preference will also be given to applicants that have demonstrated the ability to complete similar projects within scope and on budget, and projects that provide a reduction to an existing public health risk. The State Water Board will evaluate and score project proposals competitively based on the program priorities, requirements, and preferences that I just covered. Here are the eligible grant applicants outlined in the guidelines: public agencies, nonprofit organizations, public utilities, federally recognized Indian tribes as well as California Native American tribes, and mutual water companies. Another eligibility requirement addresses how contamination is defined. As a reminder, to be eligible to receive funding, projects must prevent or reduce the contamination of groundwater that serves as a source of drinking water. Contaminants addressed must result from a discharge of waste. Contamination of an aquifer is defined as occurring when a contaminant exceeds a primary maximum contaminant level or notification level, or when contaminants, in combination, pose a risk to public health equivalent to exceeding a primary MCL or notification level. Appendix A of the guidelines includes detailed definitions of contaminant and contamination. This program is primarily for operations and maintenance, O&M, of existing facilities that prevent or reduce contamination of groundwater that serves as a source of drinking water. Existing facility types that could be eligible include wellhead treatment, groundwater extraction and treatment systems, centralized groundwater treatment systems, and source area cleanup activities. O&M costs eligible for funding may include permitting, monitoring, reporting, utility bills, chemicals, equipment changeout, or plant operator costs. New infrastructure projects will generally be directed to our other grant programs, with one potential exception. Proposals for O&M costs can include relatively small-scale capital improvements that will reduce long-term O&M costs at the existing facilities. Applicants must demonstrate that the resulting reduction in O&M costs over the useful life of the improvement exceeds the proposed capital cost. Appendix B of the guidelines provides an overview of the information necessary to evaluate any capital improvements proposed for funding through this program. This table outlines the limits on grant amounts for eligible projects. This is detailed in section 5.1 of the funding guidelines. For operations and maintenance, there is a minimum grant amount of $500,000 and a maximum grant amount of $5 million per project, with a maximum grant amount of $20 million per applicant. For capital improvement, there is a maximum grant amount of $2 million per project and $5 million per applicant, which would be in addition to any funding provided for O&M. A few important things to note. The Deputy Director of the Division may approve funding of projects below the minimum amounts and may increase awards for projects that benefit an SDAC above the maximum grant amounts. If an applicant is applying for multiple projects, the maximum grant limit will be applied on a per project basis up to the maximum set per applicant. Now I will cover the general match requirements. A minimum local cost funding match of at least 50% is required. This can be waived or reduced for projects benefiting a disadvantaged community or economically distressed area, even to as low as 0% match based on certain criteria as in the guidelines. Match must consist of eligible reimbursable expenses that were incurred on or after voter approval of Prop 68, which was June 5th, 2018. Match may include federal grants or loans, local and private funding, donated and volunteer services, or in-kind services provided by the applicant. State grants cannot be counted towards match. Match may also include costs recovered by the applicant from responsible parties, which grant reimbursement funding cannot cover. As part of the funding proposal, all applicants must provide estimates for one or more of the following metrics of success for the proposed project. These metrics would be reported on an annual basis over the funding term of the agreement. These metrics include the volume of clean drinking water provided or prevented from being contaminated, the population or residential connections that directly benefit from the project, the population or percentage of a disadvantaged community directly benefiting from the project, the average and total mass of contaminant removed, and percent reduction of the contaminant. Grant agreements will include the development of a project assessment and evaluation plan that will be utilized to evaluate actual project performance relative to these metrics of success. Now I'm going to quickly review the actual process through which we select projects to be awarded funding. The first step is taken by the applicant. A detailed proposal consisting of scope, budget, and schedule is submitted. In the second and third steps, all proposals will be evaluated for completeness and eligibility by DFA staff, and then reviewed by a technical team based on the scoring evaluation criteria included in the Proposition 68 funding guidelines. The projects will then be ranked for funding. Eligible projects solely benefiting a disadvantaged community or economically distressed area will be funded first. Remaining projects will be evaluated and ranked by a technical review committee, and only the most competitive projects will be recommended for funding. Based on the results of the scoring evaluation, the Deputy Director will decide whether to offer a conditional preliminary award of funding for each project. If, based on DFA review of applications submitted by the January 24, 2020 deadline, there is not adequate demand to award the full set-aside to SDACs, then DFA will open a separate solicitation specifically for applications benefiting SDACs. SDAC applications will be accepted continuously until the set-aside funds are awarded. Next, the grant agreement will be negotiated and executed. DFA will only enter into a grant agreement once all the conditions outlined in the preliminary award letter are met. Once the grant agreement is signed and executed, the project can be implemented. This slide will show the necessary steps needed to complete the application. I will go into more detail about these steps on following slides. The first step is to go to the FAAST website, which is linked on the State Water Board Proposition 68 website. Next, create a new account or log in using an existing account. Once you have filled out the required information and set up a username and password, select Start a New Application from the main menu. Select Prop 68 Application from the active RFP list. Follow the instructions to fill out the application. Fill out the requested information on each tab. Open each attachment tab and upload required information. Contact DFA for attachment 7B and other documents. Some templates will not be available online, and you will have to contact DFA to receive them. This includes attachment 7B and some general compliance documents for attachment 11. And finally, review for completeness and submit the application. The next few slides will go over the FAAST application with further detail. Once you navigate to the FAAST website, you will need to create a new account or log in to your existing account. To create a new account, click the Create Account button and fill in the requested information. Once you have logged in, select Start a New Application from the main menu. If this is not your first login and you've already been working on a Proposition 68 proposal, click on Active Applications to view and edit your existing application. On the next screen, select Proposition 68 Groundwater Treatment and Remediation Grant Program Proposal under the Active RFP heading. This is the next screen you will come to. Make sure to verify the applicant information before beginning the application. Once you are in the application, these are the tabs you will see. Please make sure every tab has been addressed and its requirements met before submitting the application. These are the 11 attachments required for a project proposal. I will discuss each of these in more detail on upcoming slides. Please make sure you use the templates that are provided. Attachments that do not follow the templates will not be reviewed. It is vital that you use the templates that are provided. The first two attachments are for project and applicant background. Topics covered in these attachments include project overview, responsible parties, applicant experience and knowledge, coordination with cooperating agencies, long-term operation and maintenance, and supporting documents. Attachment 3 is for program priorities, requirements, and preferences. Information on these can be found in the Proposition 68 guidelines. Attachment 4 is the scope of work attachment. This attachment should have a description of the work performed under each task with enough detail to justify that the work completed will achieve project goals. All projects should use Attachment 4A to describe proposed operations and maintenance work. If you are also proposing eligible small-scale capital improvements, also complete and submit Attachment 4B. Attachment 5 is for supporting documentation for the scope of work attachment. Attachment 6 is the schedule. Information in this attachment must demonstrate that the project can be completed within the appropriation timeframe. The funding agreements for each project will specify actual eligible start and end dates for reimbursement. The schedule must be consistent with the scope of work and the budget and include a Gantt chart or similar, and a narrative that should include milestones, applicable permits, and activities for closeout. Attachment 7 is split into two separate budget attachments: 7A, Budget Narrative and Instructions, and 7B, Budget Summary and Detail. Make sure that the budget categories match the categories described in the schedule. These categories cannot be modified. The budget categories must also match the categories listed in the scope of work. Attachment 7B is not available online. You must contact DFA to request a copy of this template. Attachment 8 is the cost-benefit analysis. In this attachment, you will need to explain how the project's costs are worth the benefits claimed. You will be required to describe how the benefits are reflected in the metrics of success identified for the project. The metrics of success for this attachment should also be consistent with those you outlined in Attachment 3. Attachment 9 is for performance evaluation and monitoring. This attachment contains a table where you need to list the kinds of performance measures or metrics of success that might apply to your projects. You can use the metrics of success you identified in Attachments 3 and 8. For this attachment, you will also need to discuss how the proposed monitoring is adequate to evaluate the desired outcomes and how the data will be managed, stored, and maintained for the long term. Attachment 10 is for disadvantaged community and economically distressed area benefits. This attachment needs to be completed only if you are applying for reduction in match because the project benefits a disadvantaged community or an economically distressed area. Please coordinate with DFA staff for assistance if you are requesting a match reduction. Attachment 11 is for general compliance documentation. This attachment contains templates for the applicant to complete and submit with the application. These documents will be used to expedite the grant agreement execution process if your project is awarded funding. You will need to contact DFA for some of the templates required to complete this attachment. Here are some suggestions for successfully completing the attachments. Please make sure you use the templates that are provided. Again, attachments that do not follow the templates will not be reviewed. Be sure to carefully read the instructions for each attachment and adhere to the page limitations. In some cases, you may be required to build on information that is presented in previous attachments. After the attachments are completed, they should be uploaded using the Attachment tab in FAAST. Please follow the naming conventions that are provided. Once the attachments are uploaded and all of the application tabs are completed, submit the application for review. This slide summarizes the scoring breakdown for the different parts of the application. This information is covered in detail in Appendix D of the guidelines. As part of the proposal evaluation and ranking process, all projects will be evaluated based upon the following criteria: project applicant background, project priorities, requirements, and preferences, scope of work, schedule, budget, and performance evaluation and monitoring. The point values have been assigned to indicate the weight of the criteria outlined. The next two slides will show some helpful tips to help you submit the Proposition 68 application. We suggest that you contact local regulatory staff while developing the project so that there are no surprises or unknown expectations from either side. Contact information can be found in the Feedback tab in FAAST. Again, make sure to carefully read the instructions for each attachment. Review the scoring criteria for your project to make sure information you provided meets all the criteria. And finally, please provide a detailed scope, schedule, and budget that are all consistent with each other. Here is the general timeline going forward for the Proposition 68 proposals. Solicitation opened on November 15th. Applications are due on January 24th, 2020. Award letters will be sent out during the summer of 2020, and grant agreements will be executed in late 2020. This concludes our presentation about the Proposition 68 application process. I hope it provided applicants with some guidance for applying for grant funding. Please also see our website for additional information, including a frequently asked questions document. If you do have further questions or comments, please email us at the link shown here, gwquality.funding@waterboards.ca.gov. This email address is also where you should ask for the templates not provided on the website. If you do send us an email about this presentation or about the application process, please include Proposition 68 in the email subject line. Thank you for listening and have a good day.